somebody who has scaled the peak of the VARC section, learnt everything threadbare, figured out how to teach those things, and I've been doing it for now 25 years. It's very rare that you'd get to know every single thing that you need to do over the course of next few months until the CAT exam. Although I read a lot in my past, when you read, it does not really prepare you for the exam. It does give you the skill, but then it does not really prepare you for the exam directly. Grammar is also an area that you need to work on every day because it is very vast. It's a knowledge-based area, but it is so vast that unless you're working on it every day, chances are that you would never feel confident enough in it. You want to become a champion. And I know that you want to become a champion for two reasons. Reason number one, you have chosen to prepare for the CAT, which is easily one of the toughest exams that you can find in the world around you, especially when it comes to getting into the elitist, top-notch institutes. And reason number two, you have chosen to work with me, somebody who is the best in the business, somebody who has scaled the peak of the VARC section, learnt everything threadbare, figured out how to teach those things, and I've been doing it for now 25 years. So that tells me that you have this very strong desire to become a champion. And that is why so very frequently I get this question from so many of you, and the question is, sir, how do we get 100 percentile like you? Okay, so number one, I don't have 100 percentile. I also have 100% in the VARC section. So, every year there are a few people who get 100 percentile. But out of those a few people, there is somebody who has 100% as well. So I'm not just a 100 percentiler. There was a year when I went in, attempted all the questions, got every single question right, and earned that badge. So this session is all about my journey of reaching to that particular level, and I hope that this journey will teach you a lot about how you can also go ahead and become the numero uno, the absolute number one in VARC. But then I have divided this entire session into two parts. The very first part talks about an area, an aspect that a lot of people end up ignoring. Now, come to think of it, if I ask you to think of what all it needs to become successful in the CAT exam or in any other domain that you can think of, I'd very strongly encourage you to pause the video and then think of what does it require to become successful. Make a list. Okay. So I hope that you've done that. Even if you did not pause, even if you did not make a list, you've at least thought of certain things in your mind. Now look at those things and you'd realize at least 70% of those things are related to things that happen up here, or as I call them, the mental aspects of the preparation. So I'll tell you the kind of mindset that I have and that I use in order to become a champion. And apart from that, the second part, of course, is going to be directly related to the syllabus of VARC, the syllabus of English, and how I went on to approach it to reach that 100% and 100 percentile. So I invite you to walk on this journey with me. My name is Vikrant, in case we haven't met, and I'm your personal coach for all things English, communication, and psychological aspects of preparation. So I welcome you to walk on this journey with me, and I assure you that you are going to come up with, or going to be left with, quite a few things that will take you towards your goal. So let's work. Let's go. So welcome to this journey where, as I told you, we'd go ahead and talk about the mental aspects and the syllabus. So let's start with the mental aspects. Now, this is one of those areas that we so very frequently ignore, but the truth is every champion needs to focus on this. Think of an elite sports person. Think of a team that is at the top of its craft. Look at their support staff and you'd notice that they work with somebody called a mental conditioning coach or a sports psychologist. And that is because we do need that conditioner for our mind in order to perform to the best of our ability. So what is it that I used? in terms of the mental heuristics that took me there. Let's start. So the very first thing that I want to share with you is that I am somebody who is goal oriented. So I know that it is a cliche that we need to have goals, but the truth is, even though most of us know that we need to have goals, there aren't very many of us who actually do this sincerely or religiously, and that is why this year with my students I actually introduced a session called goal setting, so that at least a higher proportion of individuals go ahead and start becoming goal oriented. So we have lived a life where throughout school, throughout college, hardly any of us have thought in terms of becoming the topper of our class. Very, very few. And in case you do think in terms of becoming a topper, the moment you share it with your friends, they'll probably start berating you and making fun of you if you tell them that, hey, I plan to go and become a topper. But then from there you come into the world of the CAT, where becoming a topper is a necessity. It is imperative. Unless you are at the very top, how would you really get into those dream B schools? So this goal orientation, where you start off by acknowledging that you are gunning for a certain college or a certain set of colleges, has to be an ideal start. And if you work with me on that goal setting session, you'd realize that goal orientation goes beyond just identifying what it is that you are aiming at. It involves a host of other things. Some of them are designed to motivate you. Some of them are designed to make the entire preparation personalized for you. Some of them are going to act as project management checklists. So it's an entire shebang. But then it's very important to have goal orientation. So when I started teaching for the VARC in the CAT exam, one of the first things that I decided was that, hey, I want to go ahead and get everything right. It was that goal, that clear-cut acknowledgement, which drove me towards those great heights. But then we know goal orientation is one thing. A lot of us do at times set a goal. Quite a few of us would also go ahead and start maintaining those to-do lists that I so very frequently advocate. Yet there are times when we do not act. And that is where the second thing, the action orientation, comes into picture. I am an action oriented individual. Now, every day, I'm saying not a single day goes by when somebody reaches out to me and asks, Vikrant, how do I prepare for VARC? Give me a strategy, give me a detailed strategy, give me a planner. People ask for all those things, right? And there is a legitimate reason behind that. Yes, absolutely yes. But then I also see a lot of people who are paralyzed in the search of that perfect, in the search of that ideal strategy. It's very rare that you would get to know every single thing that you need to do over the course of next few months until the CAT exam that will take you towards the absolute top. You can't get every single thing mapped out today. There are going to be differences in terms of the background and the journey of life that you've had, in terms of the areas that you are more comfortable with and the areas that you are challenged more by. All those things would require a lot of customizations. So exact same thing happened to me as well, where I looked around and I saw nobody who was 100 percentiler and was teaching that I could reach out to and talk to. So what I did was that I started identifying things on my own. I started making plans, but I did not wait for the perfection. I did not wait for an ideal plan to emerge. On any given day, whatever I knew, little or more, I went ahead and put that into practice. And when I would put that into practice, I noticed that the path eventually automatically became clear. So for instance, a lot of people know that they are supposed to read, but they don't read. Instead of reading, they get back and they ask things like, hey, where should I read from? What will be a good starting point? Then there are times when you share that with them, and maybe a very popular website that gets named quite often is 𝐸𝐴𝐿 essays. And then there are people who would get back and say, "Yeah, 𝐸𝐴𝐿 essays, what should I read from 𝐸𝐴𝐿 essays? Or it's so long, should I read it in its entirety?" You notice there are these questions. There are very little actions happening. So on any given day, whatever you know, make sure that you execute that plan. Do not wait for perfection. And when you execute that plan, you will learn, you will become better, and the quality of your questions will also improve, which in turn would mean that the answers that you receive from people like me, they also go on and become better. So remain action oriented. Always have bias towards action. Whatever you know, put that into practice every day. And then the third thing is, let's see, future oriented. Now see, when you start preparing, there are days when you are bound to have some setbacks. There are going to be days when you're not very happy with the way things are shaping up. And it is so very easy to become disheartened, to become demotivated, that we end up becoming distraught. We start living in the past. We start thinking of what if. We start living this life full of guilt, at times regret. And those are the kind of things that can become very troublesome. So no matter what, I practice future orientation. What it means is that whatever has happened has happened. If it was bad, great. I'll just sit down, be with that emotion for a while. I create a pity window in my life. It can be for 5 minutes, it can be for 30 minutes, where I'm allowed to feel bad, I'm allowed to rant, I'm allowed to shout. But once that window gets over, I just shake myself off and I think of, what do I do now? What do I do tomorrow? What do I do next week, so that I am able to move towards my target, my destination? So that's future orientation. And it is going to happen to you. Eventually you will write section tests, you will write mocks, and if my experience is a guide, there is going to be a test where your performance is not going to be great. That test will trouble you. But then if you get defeated by that trouble, instead of thinking of what you need to do in order to make the next test better, if you start dwelling a lot on, oh my God, am I even doing things right, and blah, 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 that is when you are going to have some problems. So make sure that you train yourself to constantly think in terms of future. Even if something bad happens, really bad happens, give yourself a limited amount of time where you're allowed to dwell in that pity, dwell in that negative emotion, and then you will go ahead and move on. So that's future orientation. And finally, obsession with perfection. So I can tell you that you can get a 99 percentile without obsession. You can perhaps get even a 99.5 percentile without obsession. But when you are aiming for 100% and 100 percentile, you need to be obsessed. You need to do every single thing exactly right. Now, I'm not asking you to become obsessed. Okay, that can at times bother a lot of people. But then you do need to have a bit of that grain. So if VARC is something, if this is the section through which you are planning to leave your competition behind, then this is the section where you need to bring in that obsession. But then if VARC is not that section, if VARC is something where you're saying that, okay, it's not a very strong suit for me, I will prepare, I'll give my best, but I don't see myself getting ahead of the competition in VARC, then at least work hard enough to reach where everybody else has reached, so that you don't lag behind. And then you can bring in that obsession into play in some other section to leave the competition out. But if this is the section you choose to be obsessed with, you would not find anybody who's better than I am to guide you, because I have lived this obsession and I can guide you rather thoroughly through this. So this is something that drives me as well. So these are the few things that happen in my mind, that I have imbibed as part of my life, and these are the things that allow me to stay positive, continue to work and move towards your goal. So I hope that you would also keep these things in mind. Keep reminding yourself of the fact that you're supposed to have goals, you're supposed to be biased towards action, you're supposed to have future orientation, and you're supposed to be obsessed if you want to become an absolute elite performer in any domain. So with that, now let us dive into the specific areas. Let's get into the world of VARC and the study strategy, the study plan that I used. You know that when it comes to VARC, you have verbal ability and reading comprehension, but then there are areas that go beyond this, and we'd go ahead and talk about each one of those things. So starting with reading comprehension. Now, a little while ago, I talked about a journey of life. So my journey of life had been such that I actually read a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean it. Just to give you a context, by the time I was done with my 8th standard, I had finished the entire works of Munshi Premchand. Come to think of it. So I read comics, I read popular pulp fiction, the kind of books that were sold on the railway station and the bus stand book-stalls. And then when my dad noticed that I'm reading all that junk, he started bringing some literary books for me, and really thanks to him that I could at least move towards more meaningful, more challenging areas that helped me grow as a reader. And after 8th, I moved towards English books. Until then, I'm somebody who has actually studied in a Hindi medium school, Hindi medium college, and it's those books that at least brought that exposure. So I started with authors like Sidney Sheldon, John Grisham, etc. But then I read a lot, and I continued to read a lot. Now, when I decided to become the absolute best, there are a couple of changes that I did bring in. The very first thing that I did was I started attempting RC passages. Now, when you start attempting RC passages, you realize that reading is different. Reading for pleasure, reading for leisure, reading for knowledge is different. But when you start preparing for an exam, your goal shifts. You are supposed to perform well in that particular context of that exam. So in a way, it is also about becoming a better test taker. It is about delivering the kind of things that the examiner wants you to deliver, right? So when I started attempting RC passages, I constantly thought about what it is that I need to work on, what it is that I need to improve further in order to make a difference. And that happens through analysis of the performance. So this analysis told me that there are certain areas where I do not perform very well. For example, one of the areas that bothered me a lot was art. Whenever I came across a passage which was based on art, and ironically, when I came across a passage which talked about all these different styles of art, that became a stumbling block. Then philosophy was another one of those areas where I realized that, hey, that's where I struggle a wee bit. I'm a science student. Economics was another one of those aspects that challenged me. So I ensured that I eventually pivoted towards reading more of these things. And on top of that, I started reading at the level at which the CAT passages were getting created. And back in the day, there have been some really nasty years for VARC in the CAT exam. So if you look at CAT 2006, you look at CAT 2007, you'd realize the passages were really challenging in terms of their language, in terms of the themes that they picked up. Not easy. But then I made sure that I engaged in the kind of reading that challenged me, and that took care of the areas and the aspects that bothered me. And mind you, although I read a lot in my past, when you read, it does not really prepare you for the exam. It does give you the skill, but then it does not really prepare you for the exam directly. Those skills definitely help, but you need to refine them further, and that is where analysis of the performance comes into picture. And alongside that, you need to constantly think in terms of finding solutions for those challenges. So genre was one aspect. I also realized that there are certain question types where my accuracy rate was not up there. When I say up there, I was aiming for at least a 90% accuracy. So even on a bad day, I wanted to get 9 out of 10 questions correct. So I looked for those solutions. So for instance, let me tell you something. When you read a lot, you eventually become good at generating overview. But then, are you able to generate a very concrete overview for every single passage? Are you there in the territory of 90%? No. So I started thinking of what do I do so that I'm able to get the main idea of the passage question right? How do I go on to generate that overview of the passage? Then I noticed that there are times when I end up reading the passage 2-3 times. Why? Because I was looking for where exactly the question has been asked from. So that led me to this realization that I need to map all the key ideas in a passage geographically. I need to know what is where. So I started working on that aspect as well. Then I noticed that there is a particular reasoning based question type that was troubling me. So I went ahead and looked at a couple of textbooks of logic where that area was taught, and then I went on to acquire that area through the dint of that effort. And today when I teach others, I've gone on to figure out how to help them because I have walked through that journey. So for instance, I am amazing at comprehension because of all the reading that I've done in my life. But then I cannot expect you to go through 1,000,000 pages before the CAT exam. So today I know what kind of reading, what style or approach of reading will help you enhance your comprehension faster. I know what kind of things allow you to generate an overview and keep that geographical retention of various ideas within a passage. Today I know how you can start getting each one of those reasoning based questions right and those main idea based questions right. So I figured out the necessary ability behind everything that was a stumbling block, and after that I just looked at previous year papers where I picked up a question, I put my feet on the table, and then I thought that, okay, here is an examiner who's asking us a question and is also creating traps. So what exactly is going on in his mind when he designs a trap, when he goes on to design an answer which is not right? So that led to this discovery of the different types of answer choices that are created. That led to the creation of strategies that work on that question type and allow you to eliminate the answer choices. And all those things are the kind of things that I do share with you in my classes today. But if you are starting on your own, I think this tells you a lot that you're supposed to read. You're supposed to attempt RC passages. You're supposed to analyze your performance in order to figure out what requires improvement, which aspect requires change. Is it a genre? Is it a particular question type? If it is a question type, do you have the relevant ability? If not, do you know how to acquire that ability? If not, you of course then talk to me and I'll tell you how to acquire that ability, and then we get into how we can eliminate answer choices. So that's the journey that helps you become better at RCs. And in this process, I also came across this one thing, and that is that I am not that great at vocabulary. I was good. I read a lot, and therefore over a period of time I did acquire a lot of nice words, but then I still was not very sure of quite a few of those high frequency words. So I made it a point to devote some amount of time to vocabulary every day, and even today, even after all these years, I do devote some time to it. So this is one of my everyday areas. In fact, let me make it grammatically correct too. So this is one of those things that I call an everyday area. Unless you're working on it every day, you may not be able to see a significant difference or improvement. And when I started working on this, I realized that there are these challenges that we face, challenges in terms of you don't know what to what kind of words to pick up. You don't know where to go ahead and learn those words from. So all those things, I basically went ahead, resolved all of those challenges for myself through studying a lot, reading a lot, thinking a lot. And then I actually share that in this session called Vocabulary Strategy Session. You will find that on YouTube. You can go ahead and look that up, where I talk about what kind of words and from where and what are the best resources, etc. that you do. But then I did that every day, and when I was working on it, I took out 15 to 30 minutes to vocabulary every day. And that's what I recommend to everybody. And even today, when I don't need to, I do devote 3 minutes to vocab every day. I have a 3-minute session where I'd go ahead, learn a new word. I'd probably, and there are certain books, certain tools. If nothing else, I'll probably open a dictionary, go to some random page, pick up some words. Okay, so you need to make sure that you devote some amount of time every day. And in case you want to know more about vocab and how to deal with it, you can always go ahead and look at my strategy session that I've created. Another thing that I realized was that grammar is very useful for RC. You know why? What is the most basic unit of communication? The most basic unit of communication is a sentence. Why? Now, the first thing that comes to our mind usually is word. You know, a word is the most basic element, but that's not true. If I pick up some words and I just give to you in a random order, you won't be able to understand me. The communication happens when you arrange those words in a very specific manner. So I started spending time on grammar, which told me about all those different components of a sentence. You remember, you have a subject, you have a predicate. Additionally, you realize you have phrases, you have clauses, then there are 5 types of phrases, 3 types of clauses, 2 more types of clauses, all those differences, right? So these things allow me to break a sentence down into its individual, into its constituent components, individual components or constituents. So whenever I come across a sentence which is lengthy, a sentence which is convoluted, and in the exams I've seen sentences that run into 4 or 5 lines at times, this particular ability helps me to understand that sentence correctly. So I just identify whether it is a simple sentence or a compound sentence or a complex sentence. You know, how many clauses do we have here? What is the relationship between those clauses? And then I go to every clause and figure out the subject and the predicate. Then I look at the phrases. I break everything down into separate units. I understand every separate unit, then I combine it all and I understand that sentence really very well. Now, do I need to do that for every sentence? Nah, but if I come across a sentence whose understanding is critical, whose understanding is required to understand the or to answer the question, then I at least have developed this ability. And for that, grammar. And grammar is a knowledge-based area, and just like vocabulary, grammar is also an area that you need to work on every day because it is very vast. It's a knowledge-based area, but it is so vast that unless you're working on it every day, chances are that you would never feel confident enough in it. On top of that, studying grammar would also help you in OMATs. You are serious about NMAT, SNAP, ZAT, etc., right? If yes, then you know that you got to work on this as well. So for this, I started with a book that was recommended to us in school, Wren and Martin. I did not really read it in school, but then subsequently I did sit down with Wren and Martin, read it. Then I picked up another book, read it. Then there is a friend of mine who wrote a book. I went ahead and read that book as well. And then I moved towards books that were bigger and that talked about more obscure parts. Then I started referring to books that were focusing on the usage. Then I started working with the workbooks to become even better and to revise every single thing that I studied. So that was a journey. And just like vocabulary, which I did every day, I devoted 15 to 30 minutes to grammar every day. And I could read all those things because I was also a teacher, right? So I am a teacher. So that also made me a more effective teacher. But then you don't need to go through multiple books, but at least make sure that you pick up one book and go through it thoroughly. And after that, maybe pick up some workbooks, and that will take your game to the next level. So that's grammar. Then I realized that a large chunk of the CAT exam is actually testing your critical thinking. And critical thinking is taught directly in critical reasoning. So I dove into this area called verbal reasoning. Critical reasoning is a part of it, and that part, when combined with comprehension, makes you superior at critical thinking. So getting the drift. So and in case you have been working with me, or even if you have not, I actually cover this even in my foundation classes. So if I look at the last 5 years of CAT paper, in reading comprehension, we get 16 questions. Now, out of these 16 questions, 6 to 11 questions actually rely on your critical reasoning. So I started devoting a lot of time to it. So I began with reading a textbook of logic. That suddenly opened up a lot of things for me. After that, I started jotting down the arguments that I came across in my life. So I did that very religiously for 1 month, 30 days, where I was just thinking of, is there an argument floating around me? That increased my awareness of those arguments. That increased my ability to spot arguments. And consequently, I did not have to sit on a table and a chair in order to study critical reasoning and become better at it. I integrated it into my life. And that made me a better speaker. That made me more persuasive. That also, of course, helped me in the exam. So I went ahead, I read those logic textbooks, and after that I read quite a few books, and I became fascinated by logical fallacies. I became fascinated by the pursuit of imposing your mind over your mood, your emotions. And that turned out to be a very fabulous journey that made me excellent at critical reasoning, which in turn helped me get all of those reasoning based questions right. So a very concrete suggestion for you will be that start noticing the arguments that float around you. Do that for 30 days. This is one of those areas where you don't have to sit on a table and a chair in order to practice it. You of course do need to take out some time for that. Yes, that there is no substitute for studying in that sense, but the moment you involve it and integrate it into your life, your practice suddenly increases manifold without much effort. In fact, I do the exact same thing for RCs as well. How? See, at the end of the day, RCs are fundamentally about comprehending, understanding others. So I do talk to a lot of people, and when I talk to them, I bring in that necessary listening skills and that necessary intensity where I'm trying to understand everything that they have in their mind, which they're trying to convey using those words. So I just treat those words that you share with me as a bridge, where I walk on that bridge and get into your mind. That's how it goes. Okay, so make sure that you do not ignore verbal reasoning. If you do that, you'd actually end up in a big problem when it comes to the CAT exam. And finally, verbal ability. So we know that we get all these paragraph based questions. So I worked on writing / composition skills, because I realized that at the end of the day, the true purpose of testing us on these paragraph based questions is to figure out how capable we are when it comes to organizing our thoughts and creating larger pieces. So I dove deep, where I studied about paragraphs and the different types of paragraphs and the different type of sentences that exist within a paragraph, and why people switch from one paragraph to another. And then within a paragraph, what are those different strategies that are used to generate a flow of ideas. After that, of course, I started looking for the various clues that are hidden within the paragraph that can allow us to arrange the various sentences together if somebody were to jumble it up and share it. And that journey essentially made me very well versed with para-jumbles as well as paragraph odd one out. And then when CAT introduced para-completion in 2006, a new variety of para-completion in 2006, I was ready to handle that as well because of all that effort. And today, whenever they come up with a new question type, for instance, best summary was brought into the exam quite late. I mean, I've been teaching for 25 years. Of course, they've been there for almost a decade now. But I had already spent 15 years in the CAT. So they came in quite late. But then I realized that they are actually an easier form of comprehension. They are an easier form of main idea questions, so to say. When they introduced sentence placement questions very recently, in the last 4 odd years, once again, it's just a variation of para-completion. If you know how ideas flow and you have this ability to identify the clues, things become easy. And that is why in my classes, I of course teach the approach and I train you to identify those clues. I also ask you to go ahead and write. It's a skill. Unless you practice it, you won't acquire it. I ask you to write so that you are able to take your performance in paragraph-based questions to the next level. That's necessary. And that's how you go to that 100 percentile and that 100%, where you get to the soul of the question. You try to look at what exact ability is the examiner trying to see in me through this question type. If I want to acquire that ability, this question should become a cakewalk for me. That's exactly what happened, right? So that's what I did for verbal ability. So now that I've shared all these things with you, I hope you get a glimpse of the mindset that I have and the way I approach each one of these areas, and that should allow you to go ahead and perform better. In case you want to know more, feel free to get in touch with me in this Telegram group. So that should help. And before I sign out, learn to hustle. So we know that good things come to those who wait, but then the truth is only those things come to you that are left behind by those who chose not to wait. So do not waste another day. Go ahead, adopt this mindset, adopt this approach, work with me, and we can move towards something really great. So that's where you and I will stop today. See you in the next one. Take care.